And now, it's The Law Show on CL 650. A comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law. Now, here's Sterling Fox.
Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so cross your heart? Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so cross your heart?
Well, do you swear to tell the truth? Okay, that's a great introduction to The Law Show. Good morning and welcome to the program. Sterling Fox with you here on CIL 650, joined in studio by two delegates from Murphy Battista, LLP, Vancouver personal injury lawyers, in the persons of Joe Murphy, QC, founding partner of the firm, and John Cameron, one of the newest members of the firm, joining us in studio. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Sterling.
Good morning, Sterling.
Joe, the firm goes back to the days when interest rates caused pain just even thinking about them, when they were almost 20%. Murphy Battista has been around since the early 80s.
Sterling, January 1982, the interest rates, the bank rate prime was 19%.
Ouch.
When I hear about people getting mortgages for 2.6%, I just think, boy, this is a different world.
That's right.
Joe Battista and I took our two secretaries and we rented two little offices and began the firm in January of 82. Businesses were closing. Businesses weren't opening. And, of course, the bank that we dealt with was very reluctant to loan us much money because, again, no businesses were opening then.
And you were also going into the business of personal injury law. You weren't even, in terms of a bank risk, if you were going to do corporate stuff, at least there would have been a better chance of cash flow that a banker might sign off on. But here you were going into personal injury law.
From the banker's point of view, we were a very poor risk.
Right, exactly.
They wanted to see the receivables, show us who owes you money, and
right.
We didn't have any.
Because you were brand new.
And they left. They just thought, boy, these guys are a problem. So today we're 16 lawyers, a support staff of about 60. We have a large office in Vancouver downtown and the Scotia Tower across from the Hudson Bay, and we have an office recently opened in Kelowna.
Oh, that's right, yes.
And we have clients literally all over the world, mostly in BC, but we have clients across Canada. We have clients from the States. I've represented people from Europe, from Australia, from anywhere and everywhere.
Now, John Cameron is, as I mentioned moments ago, the newest member of Murphy Battista, but that makes you sound like a raw green rookie, and you're anything but, John. Welcome back. It's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again, Sterling.
John is a former Vancouver City police officer who went to law school while still in uniform and still serving and protecting.
Yes.
With the idea of once graduating from UBC's law school to integrate the career that you were already engaged in, police work, and then law, somehow or another to become a police lawyer.
Fair enough, yes.
And they didn't have an opening. Such a position didn't exist in those days.
It didn't exist. I think it does now, and that's a good thing because the police need, timely legal advice at all times. But it didn't exist then, so I might have been a bit ahead of the curve for that idea.
Right.
So I had to sort of make a plan B, and that plan B ended up going into law and eventually going into personal injury law. And I've been doing that now for about 15 years, and I've represented maybe about 1,000 people, and I've done 35 trials for injured people successfully so far here in BC courts. And now I've done something, big change for me is I've joined with the firm that I think is the best personal injury firm we have in town.
Well, and you've been camping out on their real estate for the last 8 or 9 years anyway. You've been subletting space in the Murphy Battista offices, so now you just finally joined the team.
I did. That's a little police surveillance. I thought I'd conduct a long-term surveillance on them, and I'm impressed with what I saw.
Well, I was just going to say, aren't you glad you passed that test, Joe?
Yes, for sure.
We're going to talk insurance on the program today. We did last month when we got around and spent the whole. We were going to talk about a multiplicity of insurance protection, and we ended up spending the whole show on car insurance. And Joe, that wasn't a bad thing because it's the bulk of your business at Murphy Battista. It's how most people get injured in British Columbia. But we're going to move on and talk about different types of insurance. And the reason, friends, we've got lawyers talking about insurance rather than insurance people is because the lawyers are on the back end of the insurance. This is where the claims get made and or settled or rejected or certainly contested. Right, Joe?
Yes, for sure.
So let's talk about home insurance. And that sort of breaks down into two categories: homeowners insurance and tenants insurance. Everybody in a domicile of any kind should be insured. Whether you own the place or whether you rent, you should have insurance, right?
For sure. If I own a home, Sterling, and I have a mortgage on that home, the mortgage company is going to insist that I have insurance,
Right.
because they want to make sure if the home burns down that the money will be paid out to them as the mortgage holder. But from my point of view, from my experience, I think the most important part of the homeowner insurance coverage and the most important part of the tenant's package is the liability coverage that it provides to them. Because that liability coverage goes far beyond the borders of your home or the boundaries of your apartment. It covers you for just about any liability arising out of your negligence anywhere in the world, except when you're operating a motorized vehicle or when you're working.
I have to stop you. I just have to stop you here, and this is why we decided, because we were sitting here just planning the hour with John and Joe and talking about what types of insurance. There's so many out there, and Joe said, no, we want to start with home and tenants packages, because I don't think, Joe, and many of us, I would think probably an incredibly small percentage of us understand home and or tenants insurance. It's all about protecting ourselves when somebody falls down or hurts themselves on our property and wants to sue us. That's why we buy homeowners insurance, or in case the place burns down. And you're saying, yes, that's all covered, but it's about the other coverage that makes it so important.
Yeah, Sterling, I'll just give you some examples. I had a client some years ago, a tourist from England, who was run over on the ski slope by a snowboarder. He was a kid going to school in BC. His family lived in Ontario, and my client was quite badly hurt.
Okay.
So we're suing this snowboarder, but unless there's money to recover, the lawsuit isn't going to go anywhere.
Right.
This kid's homeowner's policy from his parents' home in Ontario provided the coverage. That insurance company, the homeowner policy, hired a lawyer to defend this kid, and ultimately they paid out the claim. I've had a client who was injured.
So homeowners insurance from Ontario covers a person in a ski accident in Whistler, BC.
Yes.
Amazing. Just amazing.
I had another client riding a motorcycle down a road in Vancouver, and he was badly hurt when a pedestrian ran out of an adult from between two parked cars into his path. The pedestrian had a broken leg, and the guy riding the motorcycle had a broken neck. And that fellow's homeowner policy paid the claim. So it covers just about anything. If I'm in a store and I'm not watching where I'm going, and I trip over and smash a display that's worth $10,000,
right,
my homeowner policy will cover any claim arising from that. If I'm on holidays and I'm riding a bike and someone jumps out, or if someone's walking along and I'm not watching where I'm going,
right,
and I run into them and hurt them, my homeowner policy will cover that.
That's amazing.
So, and what that means, Sterling, is people, when they buy the homeowner policy or buy the tenant's package, should maximize the liability coverage that goes with that. The basic liability is $500,000 or $1 million, and I always say to people, get the most you can,
right,
because it costs so little, and if you need it, it becomes so valuable.
John, I wanted to follow up on the tenants part, because Joe's done a magnificent job of explaining the benefits to the homeowner while adding in or the tenants.
Yes.
Let's talk about the tenants part, because more and more of us living in Metro Vancouver are renters because of the silly stratospheric cost of houses.
Yes,
more and
correct,
more
sir.
of us will become renters as years go by. So why? Because a lot of renters will go, well, you know, the guy who owns this place has got it covered, so if it burns down, he's going to get paid out. Why should I double up on the coverage?
And that's a big mistake by the renter. You'll often see tragic stories where a building, say, burns down an apartment, and you'll hear later that they're doing a drive for money for the tenants, because
Sure,
maybe most or maybe none of them had insurance.
Right.
And so, although it's not, I agree with Mr. Murphy, the coverage for liability is the most crucial part. But even as a tenant, just thinking about the things you own in your apartment, imagine if it was all gone. You have no access to coverage. So tenants should definitely have coverage, and they should also maximize liability as well. Because just like the homeowner, if the tenant, as Joe gave an example, runs into someone on a bicycle and hurts someone and is getting sued personally, their coverage would step in for them as well.
Right. Okay. So it's equally, Joe, important for both homeowners and tenants. And it's because of the liability factor. So when I go to renew, let's say I'm a tenant. Let's say I've got an apartment in Yale Town, and it's time to go renew. So I should bring it up with my broker next time if I'm not asked at renewal, because usually you show up and they've sent you your homeowner's policy, and they've highlighted and put an X beside where you're supposed to sign and bring it in, and bingo, you go out, you're good for another year. And so if I don't introduce anything new into the conversation, Joe, that's not going to come up. So the onus is on me, the renter, to make sure that my liability coverage is topped up, right?
Sterling, if I'm a tenant, I've got to make sure firstly that I've got a policy, because I think a lot of tenants don't have these policies.
Well, and John's point is quite right.
They think my contents are worth $2,000. I don't need it.
Right.
In fact, it's got many uses. Number two, you should have maximum liability. Now, when we get into contents, one of the things that's a good idea is for people to take photographs or a video of the contents in their apartment or house.
Okay.
Because if there is a fire, if it does burn down, it is next to impossible to remember everything that was there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a video, if you have photographs, it's really a good basis to take on this terrible task of trying to list everything that was there. And insurance companies want to list. They want to know what the item was, when it was purchased, what the cost was, what the replacement cost is.
So typically in an insurance policy, John, it will say there will be an automatic level of coverage, say personal goods valued to $100,000.
Yes.
And then if you think your stuff is worth a heck of a lot more than that, you got maybe a couple of paintings or whatever, you would have to increase the coverage arbitrarily beyond that threshold of minimum, right?
What you end up doing is you end up balancing to get increased coverage, you're going to pay a higher premium,
of course,
and you find that right balance. But I think on the liability side, that's one where it's often not very much extra money to increase that the liability coverage, and that's when you should certainly look at doing. And I agree with Mr. Murphy. I used to be a police officer, so we'd have people whose things would be stolen, and in some cases they would say, "Oh, I had this very expensive item passed down to my parents, or somebody's fantastic golf clubs."
Right.
And I would say to them, "Okay, well, do you ever have any pictures of that to show what they're like?" Because the insurance company might suspect maybe you're making
this
it up.
Right.
And it's true. I suggest strongly that anybody, if you have any particularly valuable items, take photos of them. It's so easy nowadays with your cell phone to snap some shots. You'll forget you ever did. When the time comes, it'll come in very handy.
So, Joe, if just following up on John's remarks and yours too about documenting your possessions, if you fail to do so and start making claims, as John suggests, maybe there's a little suspicion on the part of the insurance company that, wait a second, this isn't the kind of person that's likely to have a Matisse in the bathroom. And I'm, of course, exaggerating, but if you don't have evidence, it's going to be harder to get a dime out of these people, isn't it?
It doesn't mean it's impossible. It means it's more difficult for everybody. It's more difficult for the person, the homeowner, to prove it, and it's more difficult for the insurance company to accept it and to put a value on it.
Okay. So again, here are just some of the tips in terms of organizing either homeowners or tenants insurance coverage. So the basics, Joe, are, of course, it would be evaluating your material possessions and making sure that there is an allowance for replacement.
Yes, and most policies provide coverage for, say, jewelry, but only to a certain level.
Correct.
So if you have a valuable piece of jewelry, that has to be added on to the policy. If you have very expensive and valuable artwork, that has to be added to the policy.
Right.
So you've got to really look at what's covered and what you have and make sure that the coverage, in fact, covers all of your things.
I'm a big fan of the Antiques Roadshow. And because I love when people will say, well, I bought this for $30 at a flea market. Well, sir, it's worth $500,000. Oh my gosh. Or they'll say something like, well, we estimate the value of this to be $10,000, but for insurance purposes, we would place its value at $15,000. So they expect people who buy pieces of art or other collectibles, Joe, that they're going to want to cover those. And so they increase the value beyond what they might be able to pawn them for insurance purposes.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that the insurance company is going to pay you $15,000. So you buy the $15,000 worth of coverage.
Right.
But that doesn't mean there's an automatic payment of that amount. The insurance company will pay what the item was worth. So if I have a painting that's worth $10,000, and I insure it for $25,000, and my house burns down, the painting's gone.
You're not going to get
the
25
insurance
grand.
company's not going to pay me $25,000.
Right.
So it's a good idea to have more insurance than you need, better than less. But it doesn't. There's not a guarantee of payment unless if you have an appraisal that shows the value of the painting, an independent professional appraisal, then you're probably going to get what that amount is, less any deductible.
Okay, so an adequate coverage for all of your material goods, John, is key. And maximizing liability, whether you're a renter or a homeowner, make sure that you top up whatever the insurance company will allow to the max for liability coverage.
And the other thing to think about is, and this often happens, is people end up in a scenario like Joe described, a couple riding a bike, hit some pedestrian.
Happens on the seawall all the time.
Yeah.
And then you get a letter from a lawyer, perhaps, that says, well, I'm representing this poor lady, and you run them over. Some people don't even think that the first thing they should be doing is contacting your home insurance company and agent and saying, this has happened to me. Am I covered by you guys? And if so, what do I do now?
Right.
And cooperating with them. And what a relief to find out that, in fact, they will appoint a lawyer for you and defend you. And many people don't even think that step through, but that's very important to keep in mind. It doesn't hurt ever to check in when that kind of situation arises and see if you might have coverage.
Well, I suppose the big takeaway from the homeowner or tenant's insurance simply is the fact that it is so much more insurance than what most of us assume it to be, Joe.
Correct.
And we all need it. And perhaps with a little bit of luck, we'll never discover how valuable it really is. But if you maximize your liability coverage, you're going to enjoy a lot more peace of mind.
For sure. For sure.
Okay, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to move on to the category of life insurance with our lawyer guests, John Cameron and Joe Murphy, QC, from Murphy Battista, LLP, in Vancouver at 650 West Georgia Street. That's the Scotia Tower, right at Georgia in Granville, and, of course, online at murphybatista.com. Have a look at the website while we take this quick time out on CIL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CIL 650.